Okay, so now we will create a method of using envelopes with our sound. So you can see over here on the left a completed version, and this should be what you ended up with after the last tutorial. So first I'm going to need a little more room, so I unlock the patcher, and then I'm going to take all this stuff and just move it up a little bit. So I have a little bit of room, don't need a lot of room, but just a little. And so in order to create an envelope, we need to be able to specify a starting amplitude, which in this case will be 0, and it's usually 0, I suppose, and then progressively move through an envelope. So the way that we do this in MaxMSP is to create an object called a multiply object. And so I click the letter N, and then Shift 8 to get the multiplication sign. And then the one I want is the one with the little tilde next to it. Press space, and then just type 1.0, just because we want to have something in there. And then we click on press return, and there you go. So what we want then is that this object is sort of like a gain object, and it will turn the volume up and down. So then what I want to do is take our signal, and I'll move this one to the input there, and this one there, like that. So that's how we hook up this object. Okay, now we need an object to actually create the envelope, and that uses a line object. So type the letter N, and then LI, and this happens to be the line object that we want. Excuse me. So I'll click OK, or return, and then that's what we put in here. Now the way the line object works is it requires information such as this. I'll show you how this goes. So I want to create a message, so I type M, the letter M, and the first thing I type in is the starting point. So in this case I want to start at 0, so I'll start with 0, and then a comma. So there's my starting point. Then what I do is I type a space, and then I type the highest amplitude I want to get to. In this case, the highest safe amplitude would be 1. So 1 point. And then a space again. And then the amount of time I want to get there. So for this envelope, let's say we want to take 2 seconds. So I would type the number 2000, and that's because the number that it's expecting is in milliseconds. So 1 second is 1000, 2 seconds would be 2000. Okay, then I'm going to type another space, and then I'm going to type another goal, another amplitude point. In this case, let's just go back to 0, and then space, and then the amount of time to get there. So in this case, let's say 500 milliseconds, so half of a second. So this is my envelope then. So I start off at 0, I go up to the peak amplitude of 1 and 2000 milliseconds. Then I go back down to 0, and I take 500 milliseconds to do that. So I click that up to my line object like that, and we should be ready to test it out. So let's turn on, make sure that the audio is turned on. Select a sound here, let's do phaser. So every time I click this message, every time I send the message, it starts off at 0, goes up to 1, takes 2 seconds to get there, goes back down to 0 in 500 milliseconds. So let's change that. Let's open up the patcher. Let's change this, instead of 2000, let's change it to 20. So 20 milliseconds is very short. And then let's make this 5,000. So in this case, it'll go up to the peak amplitude very quickly, and then it will fade out much more slowly than we had before. Lock the patcher. And there's the envelope. Now, one of the cool things about Max MSP, which is the software we're using here, is that you can actually string together a bunch of points. You don't have to just use, this. You can do more. So if let's say we have a sound, we want it to go up to 1 in 20 milliseconds, and then we want it to go down to 0.2 in 1 second. And then let's say we want it to go back up to 0.7, and we want that to take 40 milliseconds. And then we want it to go back to 0 in 5 seconds. Oops. So if I click on this, we get a different shape. It sort of responds to the different levels. And you can string together as many of those as you want. Most synthesizers that you would buy commercially have an envelope that's sort of preset. Like you can't just decide how many points you want in it. But as you will see when we start looking at the synthesizers that come with Logic Pro.